Hello, class. It's good to be back with you for another discussion. This is week 2 discussion. Um, Looking up JSTOR and going to JSTOR. During my undergraduate and master's program, I used JSTOR extensively. So I know it pretty well, and I've grown to love it. And it's easy for me to navigate, and find information that I need in a lot of the journal articles. But the 3 journal articles that I found that I'm concerned about that go along with what I want for my dissertation. The first one was written by historian Karen Anderson. She's associate professor at the University of Arizona, and she wrote in the OAH magazine of history, and it's the teaching about Rosie the Riveter, the role of women during World War II. Now, Karen discusses how American society changed and transformed during World War II, and a lot of it had to do with the manufacturing base of the United States, and with the men going off to fight the war, they needed women to be able to build, and they did it successfully. And so her journal article is about how American society was transformed during that time. The other journal article that I found it's by Alan Winkler, and it's titled World War II, The Home Front, a Historiography. Now, after World War II, Alan Winkler says that most of the historians wanted to move on from World War II. So a lot of them were writing extensively about the New Deal and about the Cold War. The Cold War took effect, and a lot of historians were writing about that. And it wasn't until about the 1970s and 1980s that historians came around and said, hey, there was a lot of things that happened in American society on the home front that was very transformational to our culture. And so he, in his journal article, he gives a historiography of a lot of the historiography of the transformation, of some of the historians, what they wrote about. And he also identified gaps within the historiography of that. And he wrote about that a lot of times the home front was overlooked, and identified a lot of the gaps that other historians could write about. And the last one the journal article I chose was by historian Andrew Kirsten, and he wrote in the Michigan Historical Review, Jobs and Justice, Detroit, Fair Employment, and Federal Activism During the Second World War. And he talks about Detroit being at the heart of wartime transformation, on women working in the workplace and working. Now, one of the stories that I heard a long time ago, and in a lot of my research and things, there was a woman in Detroit, and she was a black woman, and she was a secretary, but she wanted to work. They were building a new bomber plant at Willow Run Airport, it's probably 40, 50 miles west of Detroit at the time. And so she went to school, and she learned how to rivet, and learned how to work with sheet metal. Well, then she went to the factory, and they wouldn't hire her. And she would stand in line all day, and she'd say, well, I'm trained to do this. Why won't you hire me? And then she ended up writing the newspapers. There was some of the newspapers in Detroit. She contacted them and said, hey, they're not hiring women of color there. And so they wrote in the newspapers and wrote about this and said, hey, she's been trained. you need so many workers in the Detroit area. At the time, there were 700,000 workers that were needed to, build things for the war effort. And so they did these articles on her in the newspaper. Well, one day, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president, happened to read the article, and he said, hey, this isn't right. I want anybody that wants to contribute to the war effort, I want them to be able to do so. So in 1941, he signed Executive Order 8802, which is the fair employment practice in defense industries. And he signed that in June of 1941. So she was able to go to the B-24 bomber plant at Willow Run Airport, and she was able to work and contribute to the war effort. And this was a total transformation of American culture. But my interest is Detroit, how Detroit helped win the war during World War II. And that's my discussion post for the week. I hope everybody has a great week.